You know what? Everybody wishes they had a friend like Mal in their corner. The kind of person who'll back you up no matter how bad the situation looks, swear you're winning when you're clearly taking the L, and defend every move like it's the smartest decision ever made. That's the same friend who would probably clean up the mess instead of telling you to stop making it in the first place. And somehow, they're still gonna convince everyone watching that you never threw a shot at anybody, even when it's painfully obvious that was exactly the intention. Now that's where Mal from the Rory and Mal podcast enters the conversation, because he's either putting together one of the wildest podcast runs we've ever seen, or he's getting dangerously close to turning himself into the biggest liability for the show's future. There's nothing wrong with supporting your favorite artist, but when that support turns into pushing narratives that don't line up with reality, especially as someone people expect to deliver balanced opinions, it starts raising serious questions. At this point, I honestly can't tell if this is genuine or if Mal is running one giant social experiment to see just how far he can stretch a story before the internet finally says enough. Think back to when Drake released Iceman last month, because almost everyone listening could tell he was taking direct shots at names like Jay-Z, Kendrick, Joe Budden, and Mustard, whether people wanted to admit it or not. But this is where things started getting really interesting. Mal went on the podcast and confidently told everyone that Drake wasn't taking shots at Jay-Z at all, almost acting like the idea was completely ridiculous. Naturally, people were left wondering how anyone could hear those lyrics and come to that conclusion. So here's exactly how that conversation unfolded. One of the hosts brought up the criticism they received after skipping over what many fans believed were obvious Jay-Z references on Iceman. The discussion centered around lyrics that listeners connected to Jay-Z, especially after Kendrick's Super Bowl performance, including the line about choosing the $500,000 over the famous dinner and saying he couldn't learn anything from y'all. Instead of calling it a direct diss, Mal immediately pushed back and insisted it wasn't a shot. His co-host questioned that logic, pointing out that dismissing someone like that sure sounds personal. But Mal doubled down, arguing it wasn't really a diss at all, just a small elbow, like the kind of contact you make fighting for a rebound in the paint, and somehow expected everyone to accept that distinction. Mal kept leaning on the same argument, saying it wasn't some major attack, it was just a light bump, like throwing a harmless elbow while battling for a rebound, nothing more. Every time his co-host asked whether those lines counted as actual shots, Mal refused to go there and stuck with the just an elbow explanation. That's when everyone watching started asking the same question. If none of those bars qualify as disses, then where exactly are the disses supposed to be? But here's where the story takes another turn. Fast forward to the newest episode of the Rory and Mal podcast, and Mal is once again making headlines by insisting that Drake never dissed DJ Khaled on the album either. During the discussion, the panel argued that Drake was simply calling Khaled out over things fans had already been criticizing for a while, not outright disrespecting him. Others quickly pushed back, pointing out that if Drake and Khaled were really on good terms, those comments probably never would have been made in the first place, making the situation feel a lot more personal than Mal wanted to admit. Up that Jadakiss reportedly felt the need to apologize after hearing Khaled took the lyrics personally. And that's what makes this whole debate even more interesting. Mal didn't back off either. He argued that Drake never disrespected DJ Khaled at all and was simply being honest about how he felt, saying there's a huge difference between addressing someone's actions and outright insulting them. According to Mal, just because you call someone out doesn't automatically make it a diss, and that's the line he refused to cross. But another host immediately challenged that logic, pointing out that Drake is far too calculated for anyone to believe those lyrics were random. They argued that Drake knew Khaled had already been facing heavy criticism, especially surrounding the Palestine controversy, and mentioning it on the record would only bring even more attention to the situation. In their view, that wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate move designed to put an even brighter spotlight on Khaled. Mal still pushed back, insisting Drake was only exposing what he believed were Khaled's self-serving actions, and questioning why simply pointing out someone's behavior should automatically be labeled disrespect. One of the hosts even admitted he had made similar criticisms himself, but added an important distinction. Whether you call it disrespect or not, most people would still hear those lyrics as a diss. And honestly, that's the part Mal seems to keep overlooking, because if Khaled had responded with a record of his own, almost nobody would have questioned why he felt the need to fire back. The conversation kept getting unbelievable. When someone suggested Khaled would have every right to respond, Mal completely shut that idea down, saying people would only accuse Khaled of reaching and that a phone call, not a diss track, would be the appropriate response. The discussion even shifted to Fat Joe reportedly offering to help smooth things over, but Mal immediately dismissed the idea, insisting there was never any real Drake and Khaled beef to begin with. In his eyes, Drake simply expressed disappointment over how Khaled handled the situation, nothing more. When asked if the two could ever be friends again, Mal didn't hesitate, saying absolutely, because he still refused to see Drake's lyrics as disrespectful. He argued that Drake was only frustrated because someone who constantly called whenever they needed a favor suddenly disappeared when Drake was under heavy public criticism, only to later pop back up, talking about having unreleased Drake features. According to Mal, the real disrespect came from Khaled's silence during that difficult period, not from Drake calling attention to it. Even after the rest of the panel acknowledged Drake's frustration, Mal stood firm, repeating that exposing a friend's actions isn't the same as dissing them, and that's exactly where this debate continues to divide fans. Mal wrapped up his argument by saying real friends should be able to call each other out without automatically labeling it as disrespect. His point was simple. If one of his friends did something out of line and he addressed it directly, he wouldn't consider that a personal attack. He'd consider it honesty. But here's what makes this entire conversation even more interesting. All of this came shortly after Jadakiss publicly apologized to DJ Khaled because comments he made on his own podcast were interpreted as agreeing that Drake's lyrics were aimed at Khaled. Jadakiss explained that he wasn't choosing sides at all and was only trying to discuss the situation fairly, saying good media requires looking at both perspectives instead of blindly defending one person. And honestly,